There is a significant and visible difference between someone with low standards and someone with high standards. You don't have to tell me what you think about health. I can see it in how you take care of your body. You don't have to tell me what your emotional health is. I can hear it in how you speak. And you don't have to tell me what you believe about work ethic, your family, humility, or any of these things. Your standards are shown to me by the way you live. Welcome to the Evolve Podcast. Evolve your body, evolve your mind, evolve your soul, and evolve your tribe. And now it's time to disrupt. And with that, folks, I want to welcome you to another episode of the Evolve Podcast. I am your host, Steve Cutler, and today I want to talk to you about the high cost of low standards. Before we get started, I want to thank you for listening to the Evolve Podcast. You see, the Evolve Podcast is part of our passion to provide no-cost-to-consumer content that will help you disrupt and evolve into your highest self. As a coach and consultant and speaker for over the past 2 decades, I know the power and value of having a coach and a tribe around you to help create clarity, consistency, and accountability. With that in mind, I want to remind you that we offer one-on-one coaching to help you evolve into your best self. And in addition to the one-on-one coaching, our flagship product, the Evolve Coaching Mastermind, is for men who want to get the most out of life. You see, these are the men that are above the fold. They are fathers, decision makers, and leadership roles ranging from middle management to the C-suite. They might be entrepreneurs, but they're driven, successful, and yet they find in one or more areas of life they haven't mastered the 4 tenets of evolving their body, mind, soul, and tribe. For more information on our coaching, please click the link in the show notes, and I look forward to chatting with you soon. And now, on to the show. What is the lowest standard you will allow? Have you ever asked yourself this question? What's the lowest standard you have for your health? What about the lowest standard you have for your fitness? If you're a business leader, what is the lowest standard of work or performance that you're comfortable with from your team? As a father, a husband, a mother, a wife, what's the low bar for your family, for your home, for your relationship? You see, too often we continue in life without pausing to assess the standards we have and how we will allow something to get to a low point before we decide that it's time to change. Low standards have a high cost, and unfortunately, they are easy to come by because too often we let time pass without paying attention to what those standards are. You might start a goal towards a project with high hopes. Maybe you acquire a new team and you have high hopes, but left unchecked, your standards lessen and lessen until you're unhappy with your life and the results that you're getting. Have you ever woken up one day and looked in the mirror and said, wow, who is that person? The person staring back at you was not someone you recognized. It was a person that had gained body fat, had lost flexibility, who was weaker, less strength. Maybe you walked into your business and everything was falling apart because you chose to not hold a certain standard. You might lie to yourself and say that you're too busy to count the cost of your low standards, and you might miss out on the success that you say you want. Think about this for a moment. Have you ever allowed just one day of not exercising to turn into another, and then another, and then that turned into a week, and then maybe a month, and the next thing you know, you have a new standard of health and fitness, don't you? Now, see, you didn't think about it, that you were lowering your standard when you skipped that workout multiple days in a row. But over time, your new standard of staying in bed longer, of making an excuse as to why you didn't get to the gym, of excusing yourself from eating well and just going to the drive-thru became your new standard. In shape turned into a shape. It's a slippery slope that many miss. Have you ever heard the excuses from those that you lead and then allowed for the low performance to slip once, then twice? And then before you know it, the excuses have now become the standard. If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. If you're good at making excuses, you probably suck at everything else in life. So how do standards slip? How do you let your initial high bar drop? Well, the reality is you probably didn't even set your standards from the beginning. You probably started out with high hopes. You may have a goal or you may have some sort of aspiration, but you didn't even start by setting the standards and the lowest standard that you would accept. Perhaps, though, you choose to lie to yourself and tell yourself that someday you'd like to accomplish that goal, that dream that's swirling around in your mind, but your standards are far too low and you've never planned and taken action. Low standards have a high cost. The most difficult reality for you to accept when your standards are low is that where you are right now, in your body, in your health, your financial well-being, your relationships, your work, your team, your performance, you see, they're all a result of your previous choices and your previous standards. As I said before, you don't have to tell me what your physical standards are. Your body does that. You don't have to tell me what you think about the people in your life. All I have to do is watch how you communicate with them. It's all on you and the standards that you allow. Now, the good news is that you and you alone have the power to improve your future state by raising your standards today, by holding yourself to those standards every day moving forward. You want to see better results, right? You want a better body, a better mind, maybe a mind that's sharper, maybe a mind that can hold more information, maybe emotions that don't jump at a hair trigger. Perhaps you want more energy, right? Then you need to start by raising your standards. Raising and then guarding your standards against their natural-born enemy, the excuse, is the only path towards evolution. So let's talk about 3 simple ideas to get you on the path to having higher standards. And hang on to the end because I'm going to give you a couple of bonus thoughts as well. Number 1, don't relent. You have to be relentless. Let's imagine that you're a leader of a team, you're an entrepreneur, and someone on your team delivers subpar performance. Here's what I want you to do. Follow the steps to a T. Number 1, listen and empathize. Hear what the other person is saying and empathize with the emotion. That must have felt difficult. I'm sorry to hear about your challenge. You see, what I'm doing when I'm listening and empathizing is I'm recognizing where the other person is currently at. If their standards have dropped, it's probably because I allowed them to. And so I'm not going to give them a hard time for it. But I do need to understand where they're coming from. Second, reinforce the standard and build confidence. As you know, I have very high standards, and I'm confident you can meet them. Let me reinforce what the goal is so that we're on the same page. When I give this message that I have high standards and I'm confident that you can meet them, I'm giving that other person empowerment and a high standard that they can reach for. You see, people will not rise to the level of the standard that you set, but they will fall to the level of the expectations. And so if you have low standards and low expectations, people will fall to that level. Third, challenge and inspire. Remind your team that they will feel best and have supreme confidence when they've delivered on your standards. I'm confident that we can achieve all the challenges and achieve the high expectations. I want to hear about your plan to achieve the goals that we've set. Challenge your team. Challenge them to come up with the plan. You, as the leader, set the bar and challenge them to figure out how to get there. Now, finally, if you're the one who has dropped your standard of performance, turn the tables on yourself. If you are the person who allowed the business to go down, if you are the person that allowed yourself to become overweight, sluggish, poor communicator in your relationship, turn the tables on yourself and have that same conversation with yourself, but be relentless in holding yourself to a high standard. Listen and journal. Empathize. If I'm asking myself this question, why did my standards drop? I'm going to listen to what's inside of my heart. I'm going to write it out. I'm going to empathize. I'm not going to relent on my new standard. And then I'm going to reinforce and build confidence. I'm going to say to myself, Steve, I know that I have high standards, and I believe that you can achieve them. I'm going to challenge myself. I'm going to inspire myself by doing something that's big, stretching beyond where I could have been before with my low standards. So number one, don't relent. Number two, move. Don't think. Far too often, we spend time having analysis paralysis. Once you know the direction that you're wanting to go, you've got to move, and you have to move quickly to accomplish your goal. Decision velocity is your friend. Make a decision and start to move as fast as possible. It's better to make mistakes on the path than it is to sit on the sidelines and wonder what the right decision is. Don't hunt for the best way at the beginning. Just start moving. Motion creates momentum. Use the power of motion to do the things a person with higher standards does. Don't think, just get moving. Third, and finally, think small. Now, this may come as a surprise to you, but having high standards in the little things are crucial to achieving your best in life. Ask yourself these questions. How dirty will you allow your home or your workspace to become before you clean it? How detailed and carefully selected is your wardrobe? How intentional are you in listening to others? Focusing on the small areas of life help you to create high standards and easy wins. These wins build confidence in yourself and reinforce your standards. Malcolm Gladwell taught in his book, The Tipping Point, this powerful lesson. As New York City began policing the small things like gum on the sidewalk, jaywalking, etc., the standard of behavior in New York rose and murders went down. All you need to do is start to focus on making a few small changes in small areas. Slow down, be present, and over time, you'll notice that your overall standard for your life will rise. Remember, your personal brand is determined by the amalgamation of your standards. Fortunately and unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, we are all judged at some point by our lowest standard, the lowest performance that we allow in our personal life and in our professional life. Now, here's a bonus tip that I want to challenge you with. And it's more so of a question than a tip, but I want you to ask this question. What life do I want? One of high standards and the results that come with it? Or do I want a life of excuses and consistent pain? Now, don't get me wrong. Getting in great shape is hard, but being overweight is harder. Making money is hard, but being poor is harder. Having a long-term relationship where you have to lean into difficult conversations is hard, but being alone is harder. Challenge yourself to answer this question with a sincere heart. What life do I want? One of high standards and the results that come with it, or one where my life is full of excuses and constant pain? Finally, I want you to ask one other question. What will you do right now to raise your personal standards and win in life? I'm not asking you what you're going to do next week. You see, procrastination is one of the biggest enemies towards high standard. And you've got to start right now. Maybe you're listening to this podcast with your headphones in and you're at home, and the first thing that pops into your head, you don't even have to turn it off. You can walk, you can run towards that task, that item, and start to do it. As soon as the podcast is over, maybe you need to call a friend and apologize because of the way you've been treating them. You need to go grab the Twinkies and throw them out. Whatever it is, do it right now. Don't relent. Move fast. Think small. And lead yourself to a better life. And on that note, folks, it is time for us to wrap up another episode of the Evolve Podcast. I want to thank you, our listeners, for joining us for another episode of the podcast. I am Steve Cutler, reminding you that it takes time and consistency to evolve, but first you have to disrupt. And now it's time for you to get out there and evolve. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Evolve Podcast. Follow us on your favorite podcast app, and if you haven't done so, please give us a rating. As an independent podcast, it really helps us get more reach. This podcast is part of our mission to help millions of people evolve into the best versions of themselves. Please check out our coaching services at evolve-cast.com or pick up some of our Evolve merch. Until next time, keep evolving.